Hi, welcome to the Day 2 challenge for the Stress to Success parents. Today I'm going to be sharing with you the background information for the task that the Day 2 students are doing in their challenge today. So I've asked them to find the specifications that detail what they'll have included in their exams, and the task for you guys today is to become familiar with what those are. So students might have seen these before because sometimes teachers will use them and share them with their students, but not always, because in reality those specifications are written for the teachers, and that's what they use to design their teaching plan for the year. But it does contain quite a lot of information that's useful to the student and that'll be useful to you in understanding exactly what they have to deal with in the year. And there's a general format of what's included in all of them, but they are really different for the different subjects. And the ones that I am more familiar with are those for maths and science, because those are the subjects that I teach. So I can tell you in detail what's in those. All of the other ones tend to follow the same general formula, but they'll have, because there's differences in the ways that the other subjects are assessed, there'll be different components of including the information about those things within the specifications. But as a general rule, so I've just got, I'm reading from a GCSE maths specification to guide me here to make sure I don't forget anything. They've all got, there's one for each exam board, and you can find them on the exam board's websites. The most common exam boards are AQA, Edexcel, OCR. You might find WJEC in Wales. You might find CCEA in Ireland. But those are the most common exam boards. There's some others. If you struggle identifying which exam board your student is doing, your child is studying with, you could look for the textbooks that have been given from school, and quite often those are printed by the exam boards. Not exclusively, but usually those are printed by the exam boards, and they'll have the exam board's name on them. If it says Pearson, it means that it's an Edexcel. It's for the Edexcel exam. Alternatively, you can ask the school. The teacher might give you that information. It being half term, it might take a little while, but your teacher will give you that information. Or sometimes the schools will have that information listed on their websites. So that's another place that you can go to find out which exam board your teen is doing their exam in. Once you've found it, you can go to that exam board's website and just look for GCSE. There might be previous GCSE specifications included in there, and they'll have past papers in them that might be useful for you, but the specification is different. Make sure that the specification includes 9 to 1 in it, in the name, because since the reform, all of the specifications were rewritten for the 9 to 1 grading system, and then the new specifications were named to show that they were for the new 9 to 1 grading system. And most haven't rewritten the new specifications since then, because it was only a few years ago. So those are the specifications that you need. Most of them, I think, were rewritten in 2015 or 2016. So that'll be the edit dates that you're looking for. If you struggle to find them, you're very welcome to put a comment below the video post, and I'll help you to find the ones that you're looking for. Once you've found the exam board, then the specification for your teen's exam, you'll see that there's a 4-digit code to indicate which specification that is, and that's just a final confirmation that you've got the exact right one, but you don't need to find that information. There'll be an introduction which you can ignore, because that's usually about why they're the best exam board, and then a bit of information for the teacher, which you can ignore. There's quite often a specification at a glance page, which is just a summary of what's inside the specification. Literally just the topic headings, and there won't be that for maybe about 5 or 6 of those. And then it'll give you some information, usually about the way that the assessments are set out. So it'll be how many exams there are, how long the exams are, how many marks are included in the exams, and then if there's separate components within those, it'll detail those. Maybe what types of questions to expect. And there might be some indication of how it's differentiated between foundation and higher tier exams. So that information is quite important for the student to know what they're preparing for. As an example, if you were to look for the difference between Edexcel foundation and higher maths papers, you'd see that there's quite a significant difference in the amount of algebra that is included in the higher tier exams relative to the amount of algebra that's included in the foundation. So if you were, for a student that's between the two, making the decision about which to pick, that decision might be quite heavily based on how well they get on with algebra. So those things can help you with decisions like that. And then further on it tells you about the subject content. So this is where, oh here we go, this is the bit that I was just talking about here. The percentage of each of the 5 topics for the maths paper is indicated in the maths specifications, and it is 20% algebra for the foundation exam to 30% algebra in the higher tier exam. So it's an extra 10% of the questions will be based on algebra, and if that's something that you hate, why would you inflict that on yourself? That 10% instead goes to number questions, which would be things like percentages and ratios and best buy questions and things like that that are a little bit less taxing. There might be some extra notes about the specification and the subject content and why it's set out that way, and what the Department for Education expects students to get out of that. You don't have to read that. You might find it interesting, but you can skip that. If you go down, the most important part and the bit that you should encourage children to use for the revision is the subject content, and it's a specification. It's called a specification because it literally specifies every item that you need to know before you go into the exam, and it might also list. It will show what's just foundation only and what's higher tier. For sciences, it will show what content is only applicable to students studying triple science, and it might also indicate ways that they've built in use of ICT and mathematics into non-mathematics subjects, but you can ignore those parts because they're mostly for the teachers. So it's the subject content that you need to have a look at, and that can be used literally as a tick list to say when your child is comfortable with that subject, they can tick that off and say, I don't need to revise this, I'm happy with this, this is fine, this one needs a bit more work, this is what I'm going to study next. So it helps to set out exactly what they need to cover in their revision. Sometimes at the end you've got some appendices, and like for the science exam it might show the practicals that they're required to know about for the exams. So they might have to describe the steps of those practicals. They need to know those ones quite well. The expected results, the way it's assessed, and the way that it could be written up. So they learn them ones in quite detail in the lessons. Specific assessment objectives are mentioned in there, but you don't really need to read those because they're not subjects so much. It's skills that the student should pick up as they're studying that specification. So whether they can accurately recall facts, terminology and definitions, whether they can use and interpret the subject-specific notation correctly, whether they can accurately carry out routine procedures, whether they can make decisions and inferences, whether they can interpret graphical and statistical information. These sorts of things as what they're being assessed for in the exam. So it's not something that they would say, yes, I've learned this. It's hopefully a skill that they'll pick up through the course of studying the exams. And there might be some information about the way that the grading works, but that tends to be decided after the exams. There's a lot of other stuff that tends to be stuck on appendices that aren't really relevant and that you can skip completely. But essentially that's the value that you can get out of finding the specifications for each of the subjects that your child is taking exams in. So see what you can find for them today, and if you have any questions about any of the information that you're looking for or where to find them, send me a message. I'll post the links to the main exam board's web pages so that you can start from there, and I'll come back online later in the day to answer any questions that you might have. Plan is to come online at 11, at 12, and then again in the evening. Okay, so I'll speak to you all again soon. All right.